This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Hey everybody, Chris Bentliff back with ProCFO Partners and Create the Next. I have Carlos Sava back again. Last time, Carlos, we talked all about some really interesting things around kind of mergers and acquisitions, and we kind of talked about the readiness for acquisition. We talked about some of the things that can go wrong, things to look for. I want to continue that conversation this morning. And I think that you've got some really interesting experience, probably some interesting illustrations on how things have gone in your experience with companies that you've worked with. Let's talk a little bit about how I know if I'm ready for a merger or acquisition. Maybe both on the I'm ready to be the buyer or the merger, or I'm ready to be the mergee or the acquired company. What are some things that I should be thinking about or looking for? Some ways that I can kind of quantify my own sense of readiness in these situations.
Sure. Wonderful question, and very different process between being the buyer and the seller. But I think there are some things that will ring true for both. And a key is the preparedness to get through a process. And it really is a process that's going to have three stages. It's going to be that search and identification, the execution of a transaction, and then the integration and value creation when you're the acquirer. When you're the seller and you're getting ready to position your business, it's probably an even longer period, but you still have to get your house in order. And that's going to include the numbers and making sure you can have accurate numbers that are going to be credible and believable to buyers. That's going to be the first place that they start in trying to assess what the company's worth. But then you've got the team and the people and materials ready to go through due diligence. And that middle stage, that execution of diligence, can be a very difficult process for companies that are disorganized and those that aren't less sophisticated. And then there is also that integration stage that can happen in the smaller business world, where you might get some of your money now up front, but you're going to have to continue to work to get the rest of it post deal. So it's still going to be three stages on both sides of it for the most part.
What should I be thinking about in my competitive landscape? So maybe I'm a company and sometimes I plan for a merger or an acquisition, and it's really been something that I've been thinking about for a long time. But other times an opportunity just kind of presents itself. And either as a competitive advantage, I should take advantage of this because, it's going to sweeten our portfolio, or it's going to eliminate a competitor buying this company that could, make things more complicated. One of the things you mentioned was my house being in order. If I live that way, if I just have a cultural of organization, then I'm ready to explore these things anytime rather than, it's almost a little like, in my mind, buying a house. Like if you're just ready to talk to a banker versus I got to take 6 weeks to get my act together, the opportunities can change. What are some of the ways that I should be thinking about the competitive landscape as I shape my own? Should I be ready to buy something? Should I be prepared for that, even if I'm not going to do it? Or should I be planning ahead? You're nodding your head, so I like that. Tell me more about what I should be thinking about.
You should absolutely want to be ready, be prepared, and there's absolutely opportunistic things that can come about. I will say that those are fewer and farther in between. Especially right now, where rates have been for a long time, that people have had money available to them. So it's been cheap and they've gone after acquisitions. So I don't think that there might be the same level of things just popping up the way that they have in other periods. But you mentioned buying a house. Well, there's some parallels and some similarities how do you know what you can afford?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to pay for this? So that's a key question that's gonna be opening up doors or closing them. If you're not ready, you're not going to get financing, and then it would all have to come out of your pocket as the owner, and you may or may not be able to stretch for that acquisition. Another point is, imagine you were trying to be happy and you were going to move into a home with your family. Well, there might be a great opportunity for a real fixer-upper, and it's in a new neighborhood, and it's wonderful. You're going to double your money if you put in the elbow grease, if your kids change schools, if your commute goes from 10 minutes to an hour. But does that really fit? So similarly, and why I would say the opportunistic things may not be a good idea if you really want to be successful and enhance your core business as an acquirer, is have that checklist. When you go out with your realtor, you have neighborhoods picked out. You have requirements of how many bedrooms or bathrooms, or will it include outdoor space? You name it. And no house is perfect and no business is perfect. So stick to that checklist of what we're looking for, why it makes sense, why it doesn't make sense, and try to not sort of be allured by the deal process or something being so cheap, because if you can't be happy in that home, or it's going to be a cultural misfit, you could end up losing more money than you thought you were going to make.
It's a great analogy, and I think it's something to keep in mind. And you just touched on it there at the end, because in addition, what if you were moving into a house with a bunch of other people already living there? And so I think sometimes there's this idea of, you've heard of the acqui-hire. I'm going to buy a company for this really talented team. But there's personalities that come with the talent, and we have to examine how those personalities mesh or don't mesh well with the existing. But also, what if it wasn't an acqui-hire? What if you were making the purchase or the acquisition for a bunch of different reasons, and you got a bunch of people, and without doing some of that due diligence? Talk me through that a little bit. What should I be thinking about, or what's the importance of understanding the personalities that I'm bringing on board in any kind of, or that I'm taking my whole enterprise in a known quantity to me, and I'm saying, we're going to go hitch our wagon to this other company, everybody. Talk to me about some of those circumstances.
Yeah, you hit on probably of those three phases. What is the most critical in creating value and making sure that this is a good fit? It's having a plan and being able to integrate or manage from afar. Integration isn't always the best course of action after an acquisition. So you're absolutely right. Especially in this mid-sized business market, there are going to be big personalities. You're often going to be dealing with this baby boomer generation that's transitioning out of their CEO role, and maybe it's to an advisory role, maybe it's out of the business completely. But what's that plan? How's that going to work? How are the employees going to be affected? Those can be some very difficult conversations, and if they're not had early on, and the two parties aren't in agreement, bad things can result, and you really don't want to be in a position where you've acquired a business, you've hired the people, and then they're not happy.
That low morale kills productivity. It takes succession planning all out of whack. I mean, it's absolutely true that the idea of, well, look at what our revenue model can look like if we buy this company, and then if you're just dealing with a bunch of stuff that you hadn't planned on, it can really throw that into disarray. I want to put you on the spot a little bit. Do you have just some examples? When in your experience, or in your, your history of doing all this, has some merger or acquisition gone really right? And what were some of the hallmarks or traits of that? And then when did something go really wrong? And why do you think that happened? I'd like to learn from some of those examples.
Yeah. So I'll give always start with a glory story rather than the defeat. So I'll give a positive outcome that we had, and then one that turned out to be more challenging. So know what you're getting. And that's sometimes really, really hard. And like we talked about with the home example, none of these businesses is perfect. So actually had a acquisition, and the customer reviews were horrendous. These customers hated this business, and it was a fabulous business that they could not be replaced by their customers. And when every year they would increase the annual cost and subscription by 20%, it angered the customers, but it was also a testament to how ingrained they were and how entrenched they were and how there was no good substitute for them. It was a fabulous business. But most of the time, 99% of the time, when you get into diligence, you want to hear happy customers. You want to hear customers that are going to continue no matter who owns the company, no matter who their sales rep is. And you don't want to be fighting through this, selling the customer again when you're going to be buying the company. Horrible customer calls. But know what you're getting. And nothing's going to be perfect, but does it fit what you need? And can you do something with it that'll make it more valuable and improve your own business? The acquisition is really supposed to be additive and accretive to what was the core. Buying a business and trying to use it to fix up the core house isn't often going to be a recipe for really making the core company more valuable. I mean, I almost think of it like putting on a pool when the house is in shambles. It's like, no, let's focus on getting our house in order and livable and more valuable. Just adding a pool outside isn't going to improve this situation, although it might be good for some giggles and laughs on a hot day.
That's more really great advice, is to be mindful of the holistic situation and be realistic with yourself and be self-aware, and all of these things that I think are the hallmarks of a well-run organization, a culturally sound organization. And if those things are true, then I imagine a merger or an acquisition so much easier, because you know who you are, so therefore you know who you want to bring on to make more of who you are, and not trying to figure out who you are and hope that somehow becomes part of the recipe.
Precisely. And I'll give the struggling story. I mean, I worked with an organization that was as well-heeled as you can imagine. And they had sophisticated operators. They had plenty of money and relationships behind them, but they themselves had a very narrow niche. And because they wanted to grow, they were looking at anything that was sort of tangential or related to what their core business was. And it often got too far astray from making their core business more valuable. And we overturned a lot of rocks and got nowhere.
And in that way, you spread yourself thin, and you lose your core competency, and you lose the thread on what customers value about you in the first place, or where you had opportunities to make more of that, because suddenly you're mediocre at everything instead of really good at something else. Fascinating.
Precisely.
Carlos Sava from ProCFO Partners. Thanks, Carlos, again for spending time with us. These are always great conversations. I hope you'll come back and dive in with us another time.
Sounds great. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.